Welcome back to Prof E Plays, and we're going to pick up again with the story of Mies Kinson here. It's been a while since the last video here, as I've been doing more of the D&D with kids stuff recently, as they were excited about doing that. I think it's time to check back in with Mies to see what he and Mara are up to. So just a quick reminder, we're at this point in Act 1, Scene 5. So Act 1, we are still kind of trying to get introduced to the world and the characters. We've not quite yet encountered, though we have heard of, what is going to be kind of the major plot line. As we know that Mies is on his way to where this rogue AI is causing problems. But in the meantime, the planet that they stopped at on the way, Mies unexpectedly met Mara here, and the two of them ran across the dead body of an older woman named Cynthia Walkel. At the time that they ran across it, the kind of official on hand said, "Oh, don't worry about it." But then they found out that Cynthia was in fact poisoned, and now because they were the ones there on the scene, they have been arrested for a suspected poisoning of Cynthia Walkel. Does this make sense? Probably not. Um, at the very least we've been following along with me, so we know that he is almost certainly not responsible. Mara, we don't know. It's kind of odd that she happened to be there. So at this point, we know that Mies and Mara are in custody. What we need to figure out is what's going to happen next. All right, so let's go ahead and do our scene setup here. And so we are again we're still doing event scenes. I apparently skipped too far. Oh yeah, so we're doing event scenes here, right? So we need then an event, an action, a thing, a plot device, an opposition, and a location. So let's take our 2d6 and roll those to figure out 7. Okay, so 7 is going to be PC's asked to help or see a reason to get involved. So PC's asked to help. Well, that's kind of an interesting thing, given as they are already under arrest. All right. Now let's come over here, and we need to establish a few things. All right, so we need action, thing, plot device, opposition, and location. We're clearly not going to roll in that order, so we'll just roll in whatever order happens to make sense to us. So right now we're doing opposition because that's the first in the book. So it looks like 47. Opposition number 47 is going to be a murderer, serial killer, or yourself. Huh, okay. That's actually really interesting given the context that we have right now. Next up, then, we have motivations. We don't need motivation right now. Themes, we don't need that. Complications, we don't need that. Locations, we do need a location. So let's go ahead and roll all 3 of these. We'll read from left to right. 490. Okay, so 490 gives us a meeting room. Okay, well, that's an easy location to integrate, especially since we are kind of on a station that's kind of aerial up in the clouds. Next, I think that's what aerial means. Then sci-fi actions. We do need an action, so let's go ahead and roll this one. So again, reading from left to right, 737. Sounds like a jet race. Okay, so the race is the action here, so that's pod racing. Sci-fi thing, 874. So it's not on this page. 874 on the next page is terrible events. Okay. Now, one thing that's always important to remember, terrible events. I almost wrote down things. All right, so terrible events, and then finally plot device. Is that whenever you're doing the solo stuff, right? So I really think of this is really just inspiration. Okay, left to right. Oh, I think this is further to the left this time, so it's 477. Okay, so 477. Turn some pages here. Oh, turn too far. Uh, it's in the Jeffries tubes that its characters, or perhaps bizarre space creatures, just make use of the maintenance tunnels not just, must make use of maintenance tunnels and ventilation corridors. So in the Jeffries tubes, which as somebody who grew up watching Star Trek: The Next Generation a lot with my family, like the Jeffries tubes, very, um, would I say I'm intimately familiar with them, perhaps? They hold a special place in my heart, nostalgically. Okay. All right, so I think that we are ready to go then. So we need to kind of think some about setting the scene here, right? So we're still in Act One, right? So the events of the plot hooks is going to hook us into having to solve the story. By the end of the first act, we should know enough about the plot to generally understand what we need to do in order to save the day. Now we are not even there yet. All we know is that vaguely these AI exist. That's basically it. So meanwhile, we are now in this situation where we've been under arrest. Eh, I need to pause for a minute. My son is yelling for me. All right, and I'm back. Okay, so at this point, I think we want to kind of imagine the scene. So at this point, we have Mese and Mara are they're in the brig, right? They're in custody in some way. So one question is, um, do they keep them together? Like this is a fairly small outfit, so I wouldn't be surprised if they keep them together. But I'm gonna make it 50-50 because naturally they would want to separate them if that's possible. So it's a question of like, do they have space to separate them? So I'm gonna go ahead and roll it. This is 50-50. I got a 68. 68 is no, so that is they are not together. All right, so they're each in separate cells. So we have separate cells for them. Now, one thing that I'm also thinking about. Okay, first I need to kind of remind myself which planet we're on. Oh, goodness. All right. So let's see. Yeah, I knew where we were headed. We're on the way to Tannel Gulls from Hadarana. Mentorak, that's it. Mentorak is where we are. Okay. So Mentorak, what do we know about that? Let's double check our notes about that one. So heavy gravity, dense, high pressure atmosphere, 90% water, population small, about 90 people, run by a company in low law level, moderate tech level. So this low law level, what that tells me is that like they're not particularly draconian. Right? We also know that it's as it says here, right? Low law, about 90 people, so it's a fairly small uh, station here. All right, so they're located in separate cells. So I wonder, like, are they at a point where they can communicate with each other? That seems to me to be extremely likely, but I'm going to go ahead and roll it just in case. So 95 or less is a yes. 21 is definitely a yes then. Right, so they can still communicate with each other, so they can talk with each other. Now, I'm thinking about how is it that Mies and Mara are going to end up being asked to help. So the question is, what are they being asked to help with? Now, what we know about them. So remember now, Mies, kind of his history, he was a pilot working with the Scouts originally. Uh, and then like, he was just recently kind of mustered out from there. And like when you look at his skills, see, he doesn't really have a lot in terms of skills. He only served, I think, maybe like 2 terms with them or something like that. Right? So he has just like this little bit of jack of all trades and like 1 point of piloting. Right? So not a whole lot of skills. Now his characteristics are pretty good, specifically the physical characteristics. Okay, so we're trying to think of what might he be asked to do. Mara, on the other hand, she's quite skilled. +3 is as high as my own my kind of Reddit-based method will give. Right, fugitive, refugee, drifter. So she doesn't have specific skills that are necessarily particularly helpful, except maybe making connections with. I imagine things like streetwise is kind of the equivalent of what she would be most skilled in. So trying to make these connections with the underground. All right. So what I'm thinking is this. Now, it seems to me to be very plausible. Okay, and we're talking about terrible events happening. Well, of course, people are being murdered. So that's a question, right? Is there perhaps another murder while we're in custody? Because that would very quickly free Mese and Mara from suspicion. I think that is very likely. So I'm gonna go ahead and roll that. Okay, we got a 46. That's a yes. Right. Okay, so that is exactly what happened. So they're in custody, just kind of waiting, right, for something to happen. Right? And then Dane Wright, who we know is the community leader, right, one of the heads, one of the people that talked to them before, and also came along to get them under arrest, and says, "Well, we have good news. We found another body. So let's find out who this body is. Is it, so is it male? 75, that's a no. Right, so we have another woman got killed. This would be Sane Sonar. Okay, so I'm going to mark that down. Sane, what a great name. Sane. Sane Sonar. What do we know about Sane Sonar? Well, let's see. Coming down here, Sane Sonar first, in terms of general skill level. Let's roll the die and subtract 3. Ooh, quite skilled. Right, so it was a +3. And let's find out more about them in terms of personality, that kind of stuff. Okay. Oops. Right, so personality table. So I'm going to roll the D100, divide by 2. Okay, so we got 44, divide by 2, gives us 22. So cruel or egotistical. So not a nice person. Okay? And finally, what was their role? Right, so I'm trying to figure out kind of. Okay, so I have my list of patron encounters here. So I can use the D66 here to read the dice individually. 64. 64 terrorist. All right. So someone apparently murdered Saint Sonar. Vince apparently might have this connection with being a terrorist. So here's the question. Okay, so we need to kind of clarify this because this is an interesting turn of events, right? Right, because somebody is out there murdering engineers and terrorists. Okay, so here's the question, right? Saint Sonar. Now, is this somebody like? Was this a known terrorist who recently arrived at the station? 54. I'm going to call that a no because I'm going to say it's 50-50 because I have no idea. Right, so this is not a known terrorist. Right. This raises the question of people didn't know they were terrorists, so what did people think they were? Right, so I'm going to go ahead and roll again on the patron table to see kind of what their cover was. Get 12, an athlete. Okay, so their cover was as an athlete. All right. Right, so Sane Sonar here. I mean, okay, I guess how old are we talking? Because Cynthia we know was pretty old. Um, so I guess is Sane also old? And that's what I can see this going either way. So one, if we wanted to have some commonalities, this could be fairly likely. On the other hand, the Sane is known as an athlete, so she could be retired, right? But I'm thinking we'll make this 50-50. Just gonna roll it one more time. 83. 83 is definitely no on that one. So not older, so younger. So on the young side. So one more question then. So Sitting comes and say, hey, well, good news for you, I suppose. We found another body. The athlete, Saint Sonar, has in fact been found killed as well. And we're going to ask, right? Like, was it poison? Now, knowing now, Dane is This is cruel and egotistical as well. All right, well, okay. So I guess that's the question. So is Dane Wright going to reveal this information? I think I think it seems to me fairly likely because I okay. Well, here's what we could do. Well, let's do a social check. Right. So successful or not, then we can do the reaction chart. Okay. So social, I got a 0. So remember, we're trying to roll an 8. Circumstances here, I'm going to say, yeah, they're balanced. So we get an 8 or higher, I get a 6. So that's a failed social check. And then we'll go ahead and roll one more time to figure out what we've got. 7. Okay, so failed social check. So here, skeptical. Okay, so there's going to be, I think, hesitant to provide too much information. Uh, but at the same time, here's what we've got. We know that there are terrible events happening. Someone was murdered. Right. Now we need to work in some other elements, right? So PCs are asked to help. So while it is true that Dane is skeptical about them, it's also very possible to me that he is going to ask for their help with this investigation. There aren't that very many people on this station, although we do have at least one ship's worth of people here. And it would only make sense that these murders started after we got here. Right? So, okay. So ask to help. Does he ask them to help? I think that's the most obvious thing. Right? So I'm just going to say it's very likely. I'm going to roll it 75 or less. He asks for their help. Oh 05, that seems like, yeah, that would be a yes. All right. So that's it. So he says, okay, we know it doesn't make sense, right, for y'all to have done it. However, we don't really have the resources. And we're trying to keep the station running now with two fewer people than normal, right? So we need your help. So I think the race element here is that it's clear that this is going to be some kind of like serial killer kind of episode. So what we're really racing against is the next victim being found, right? So we're going to have to do some investigating. Now, in the Jeffries tubes, that's one thing we have to work in, and we also have to work in a meeting room. Now, it makes sense that when we're released, that a lot of this scene is actually happening in a meeting room, right? So we go and meet, right? So the question is, while it is true that Dane is skeptical of us, right, is he in fact going to give us some of this, like some freedom in terms of using the station's resources to help with the investigation? So that's the question. I would say because he's skeptical, let's make this just 50-50, right? 93 is a no, right? So he is not so keen on lending us much help as far as this goes. And I think this might be that he's like concerned about station security, concerned about like corporate secrets, right? So trade secrets, these kinds of things. So that makes sense uh, in that kind of context, right? So Mese and Mara are asked to do some investigating. He, while at the same time, Dane feels like he can't really tell them very much in terms of details that they might possibly find useful. But his suggestion is that they probably need to do some investigation themselves, right, and do some searching, see what kind of evidence they can come up with. And here's where, in the Jeffries tubes, can we come up? All right, because that's a reasonable place for us to go and do some investigating. All right, so what we need to do, I need to figure out what kind of tech would make sense for investigations. Right, so we're going to go, we figure the people have to get around the station somehow. So I think it makes sense for us to check effectively the Jeffries tubes, right? So maintenance shafts, that kind of thing. Um, especially because like one person we found was found dead in engineering. That's a question. Was the other person found dead near one of the maintenance shafts? This seems to me to be very likely. Let's go ahead and roll that. 88. 88 is a no. They were not found near a maintenance shaft. Also, importantly, we just rolled doubles on a yes no table. That means we've got mid scene interruption. All right. So as we were talking here, we're saying, okay, what about this second body, the body of Saint Sonar? Where was it found? Was it found near one of the maintenance shafts? Something like that. So then we'd have some connection with engineering. The answer, no. And then what happens? We have an interruption. It's number 5. It's number 5 on our mid-scene interruption chart is a new NPC. Okay. All right, so that's the interruption. We need action, thing, plot device, opposition, location. Right, all of those again. So we're on plot device here. So let's go and roll one of those. So plot device is 949. Let's see what 949 is. This table. 949. Let's see here. Oh, here we go. So what's that? Strange monster, if it is a monster, threatens our characters. Okay, so all right. So, oh, I mean, hmm. This opens up another interesting possibility in terms of what kind of murders we have going on. All right. All right, next thing we need a sci-fi things. What do we got there? Again, we'll roll and go 0, 4, 2. So 042 in terms of things is an archaeologist. All right. We did say new NPC. Now we need an action. Oop, let's roll a little better. Right, 749. 749 gives us the action of recruit. Okay. Oh wait, location again. 835. 835 would be a storehouse. And then we need not a complication or a theme or motivation. We need opposition. That's a D100. Let's put these next to each other. And then roll them. 17. All right, 17 is corporate forces or an impersonator or doppelganger. Okay. All right. So that's what we've got. So new NPC is going to get introduced. We now have these various elements to throw in here into the scene interruption. Strange monster, archaeologist, recruit, storehouse, and corporate forces or impersonator or doppelganger as our opposition. Well, in that case, I can actually see a lot of these elements working together, right? So this new NPC is going to be somebody who was an archaeologist. So let's just see, uh, right? Are they male? 61 is a no. So again, from my woman list, it's Jaquel Jenker. So Jaquel Jenker comes in here. Right. She is trained as an archaeologist. Was she a very good one? It's an interesting question. Well, let's check the skill die. Skill die says a +1. Which could be worse. Right. And then in terms of her personality, wondering what that's like. So here we have personality table. Again, we'll divide by 2 here. 90, so it's going to be 45. So juvenile or reckless. Okay, well, and that makes some degree of sense. Might be why she wouldn't be the best at being an archaeologist. She's kind of reckless. So she comes in, right? And I'm gonna say like she says, we have another development. It's not just another body, but one of the storerooms, aha, so we bring storehouse into this, is totally trashed. I need somebody to come help me figure out what is going on here. Now, there are a couple guards that are hired by the station, but there aren't very many because there are only 90 people here. And so I'm going to say that like they're busy, like trying to deal with other stuff. Meanwhile, Mese and Mara are right here. We know that they didn't do it. They might possibly be able to help right, with some of this investigation, and they're certainly willing. Right, so Dean says, "This is real weird, but could you, right, lend a helping hand in trying to deal with whatever it is, right, that is going on here?" All right, so, and our answer is obviously yes. So I'm going to say that we need to go right through some of the Jeffries tubes, right? So tie that in. To get from here to the storehouse, that's going to be the best way, right, for whatever reason, for us to do this. Now, what I want to do, I need to do some investigation as we are in the Jeffries tubes, because it is very possible, like, this might be one way that whatever we're talking about is getting around. So the question is, right, what kind of skill is it? Oh, this would be recon. Recon makes perfect sense here. All right, so let's do that. So recon is at a 0. So let's see. Do we discover something in the Jeffries tubes? So 8 or more, the answer is yes. 8, the answer is yes. So there is something right in the Jeffries tubes. So a couple ideas that come to mind. So we know that the murderer or whatever is out there is opposition. We know corporate forces are opposition. We know also that um, part of our plot device is this idea of a strange monster. So I have an idea here. So, so we did find some evidence. So I want to know, is there evidence here that we're dealing with something that is not human or humanoid? I will say, like in this universe, I like running it where it's basically just humans. Right? So it's not like there are a bunch of aliens. Instead, we have humans that have colonized all these various planets. Okay. Right, so well, let's go ahead and take a shot at this. Okay. So, is there evidence? The evidence we found, does it point towards something non-human? I'm going to say very likely 75 or less. 12. That's a yes. Right, so we now have evidence of some non-human. So I'm wondering what kind of evidence this is. So what kind of evidence we would have someone, I'm thinking like claw marks or something like that would actually make perfect sense. Except that whatever this thing is, it is not killing people with claws. So that would raise issues here. I could also imagine there being like some kind of like slime or something like that. Actually, I like the idea of there being some kind of slime or something like that. Right, so I think that's what we find, right? So we find slime. That watched Ghostbusters not too long ago, right? So you have ectoplasm on the walls. That's what's going on, right? So we find slime on the walls. It doesn't really make sense. It does seem like the kind of thing like you know snails, slugs, and like leave these slime trails, that kind of thing. I think it reminds us like of that. Right, so that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. Right, so we come out into the storeroom, right, and we're looking around, and I assume we see like big mess. So can we find right, any additional slime here? I'm going to say we're going to take reasonably good time to give ourselves a +2 on the next roll. So, we're not just you're trying to do this really quickly, but we can take a little bit of time. Right? So maybe a couple hours to search 11. Yeah, that's an effective 3. That means that I succeeded and then had three more than I needed to be able to succeed. Yeah, so that's pretty good, which suggests then, right, that we're gonna know, right, is this kind of slime around? That seems very likely. Again, 75 or less. 90, there is not this kind of slime around. Interesting, right? So we then have evidence of a couple of things. Right, so this is what we found. Slime in the Jeffries tubes. On the other hand, no slime in the storeroom. So this suggests to me we might be dealing with two different things going on here. Right, so I think this might be possibly a good place to end this. We're about a half hour, right? So Mese and Mara are going to pick up next time, trying to figure out what is it that's going on. We need another step in our investigation. Until then, this is Prof. E Plays. I'm Prof. E, signing off.